I'd like to welcome to the program former Senator of Wisconsin, author of the book While America Sleeps, and the founder of Progressives United, Senator Russ Feingold. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
You bet, Sam. It's a pleasure.
I've heard you speak about Citizens United many times, and I know that in '06 and '08, in the wake of McCain-Feingold campaign finance, you felt that campaign finance was at the very least on the right track. What did Citizens United do to campaign finance?
Well, it was an absolute body blow to the system after we were getting things going in a very different direction. I know it's hard for people to imagine that things were actually better, and our memories are short. But in 2006 and 2008, we did not have the unlimited contributions to the political parties, the so-called soft money that had been so corrupting in the 1990s, and we got rid of that with McCain-Feingold. We did have 527s running around doing some stuff, but what they did was later declared to be illegal. So, people in large part turned to democracy, to electronic democracy, the Internet. And we had this advent of tremendous numbers of smaller contributions that led to other kinds of activism, and we really had the outlines of a very different and better system. There were more that had to be done, public financing and so on. But it really was improving, and the Supreme Court just threw a wrench into the whole thing with this almost lawless decision.
One of the things that struck me in the ruling on Citizens United, particularly, I think Justice Kennedy said, almost as a matter of law, the idea that that contributions do not corrupt campaigns. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know where he got that. He had no record whatsoever. I mean, this is a guy who's usually a careful justice. Unlike McCain-Feingold, where he had an extensive record that the court relied on very carefully, there was no record in this case at all. In fact, the case wasn't about this. And yet he just started making these sweeping assertions about what corruption was, what companies do, like he was talking at a bar with somebody over a beer rather than anything that was a legal decision. So it was really reckless, and I am guessing he might even be a little embarrassed at this point about what a sloppy opinion it was and how it just asserted things that aren't proven. The Supreme Court in Buckley v. Vallejo specifically talked about the role of corruption and the appearance of corruption play in our society. And I think almost everybody feels that these unlimited, undisclosed contributions have a tremendous potential for corruption.
I've heard you say that the system is less. It's more appropriate to refer to it as extortion than bribery. Explain what you meant by that.
Yeah, this is a correction that some business people made for me. When I was working on McCain-Feingold, I coined the term legalized bribery for the system. And we got a lot of support after a while from a bunch of CEOs who were sick and tired of being hit up. And they said, Russ, you talk about legalized bribery. It's really legalized extortion. And I realized they were right. It's not like corporate CEOs sit around their office and go, I'd like to throw some money around in the political process. I'd like to get rid of some of our money. It works the other way. The politicians call up and ask for the money. Especially with the soft money system. Somebody calls up they drag the senators over to the Republican committee, the Democratic committee. So it really is more like an extortion, a situation where the people in business feel like, boy, I better give this money. Otherwise, maybe my business is going to get hurt. So it really is a racket. And we made it a federal crime in terms of soft money. It should also be a federal crime in terms of these independent contributions that aren't really independent at all.
We're talking specifically about the corruption of the electoral process, and that's where the extortion happens. But no one's forcing these corporations to spend so much money on lobbying. Nobody's forcing them to hire former chief of staffs or staffers from someone's office. What can be done? Assuming that we are, at least for the time being, until the Supreme Court revisits this, we are where we're at in terms of electoral campaign finance corrupting the electoral process. But what about the legislative process? Are there things that we can do on the side of dealing with staffers, of dealing with a revolving door, of dealing with the corruption that takes place in our regulatory bodies by some other means?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, of course, actually, with the current president, we passed the laws that strengthen the lobbying laws, but they need to even be stronger. I mean, there is this unwritten code in Washington. The top legislators or their top staffs can go down and work on K Street for a huge amount of money, even if they don't know much about anything. They just know some people. And so that period, cooling off period, the revolving door period, could be lengthened. But my feeling on this, Sam, is that what happens with the unlimited undisclosed contributions is that both parties play this game and they raise this kind of money and they're essentially already bought off by the time they get sworn in. And so, yeah, sure, they're going to lobby, sure, they're going to use these techniques, but you won't even have people that are independent to try to have these rules relate to if you don't have change in the Citizens United. But yes, there's a whole kinds of things I think you can do to try to limit this. I do believe people have a right to lobby under the First Amendment, but that doesn't mean there can't be full disclosure and limitations on the unholy connection between those in office and when they leave office.
The FCC on Friday voted to require broadcasters to disclose just how much money they're getting from these political campaigns, and when we see hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars being raised, much of that money ends up on broadcast radio or television in the form of advertising. Is there any way in which we can curb it from that end? In other words, we have restrictions. We license these entities. Is there any way that we can simply say there's only so much advertising you can present?
Well, I'm really pleased that the FCC did that. It's just long overdue. And this is the part of the story that is not being told. We know that politicians are involved in this unlimited spending. We know that we hear about the people that give the money, but where's the money going? And finally, there's some conversation about the huge benefit that goes to these broadcasters of this corrupt system. So this is the first step. I think other steps can be taken as well. The original McCain-Feingold bill required that broadcasters give 50% off on television time if somebody agreed to public financing. So as part of a public financing system, we could at least create a mechanism where through the government, these people have to give lower rates. There are other regulations about what can be charged and what can't be charged, and there is more opportunity for that as well.
And tell me, just sort of in a broader perspective, Citizens United is perhaps, and maybe the Affordable Care Act are seem to be the first two cases, maybe since Bush v. Gore, that the left has paid any attention to, or any serious attention to the Supreme Court and the relevance of our courts in our system. Where would you place this court relative to past courts, and do you see an awakening on the left on the relevance of the court?
Well, it's just beginning. I mean, in fairness to some of the decisions after 9/11, the Supreme Court did do the right thing on some civil liberties decisions by not letting extreme executive power go forward, and Kennedy and others were good on that. So in that area, the court has been, before these last two justices came on anyway, somewhat of a pushback on extreme executive power. But you're right. With regard to legislation, major legislation, such as not McCain-Feingold, but the Tillman Act, actually, and with regard to the health care bill, the court is starting to act like a partisan legislature. And I think that's very damaging, and progressives need to take a look at this. You know, progressives, of course, have been grateful for the fact that the court has stood up for individual rights and over the years and some of the other decisions that have been made, such as Brown v. Board. But we have to remember that if it becomes a partisan body where people just vote according to what president's party that appointed them, it destroys the credibility of the court. And I think everyone in the country, not just the left, but including the left, is awakening the fact that in a lot of ways this court doesn't seem to be on the level, which is not only dangerous for the court, it's dangerous for our democracy, because we need a legitimate court that is perceived as being on the level, and I think they are really on the precipice of serious trouble if they knock down this health care law.
Has President Obama done enough, do you think, to fill the lower courts? I mean, I know there's been a tremendous amount of obstruction by the Republicans, and I know that's got to be particularly offensive to your sensibilities, because I think in many respects you held the right of a president to nominate and appoint justices as as sacrosanct in many respects when you were a
Yeah,
sitting senator.
this has to be taken up quite a few notches. I've heard in the last 2 weeks a lot of people really concerned about this, and of course he's being obstructed, but it's got to be a higher priority because he cannot miss the opportunity to undo the extreme approach of Republican presidents for decades of trying to fill the courts with very young, very conservative Federalist Society people. That's how you end up with a partisan court. So it's extremely important that the president intensify his efforts on this and cash in some chits to get these judges through.
And I've heard you say that, and I know that you're a campaign co-chair of President Obama's. And I've heard you say that, at the very least, the Supreme Court is a huge reason to vote for President Obama. But give me your sense of how he's been impacted by, he's had to start his own super PAC. How do you think that his administration and just over since Citizens United has passed has been affected by this need to go out and raise hundreds of millions of dollars from these corporations?
Well, I don't believe he had to do this, and even though I'm a campaign co-chair, I think he should have done just the opposite, which is to not go down this road. I think it's damaging for his reputation and damaging for the Democratic Party. But surely the advent of these huge contributions had an impact in 2010 on helping the Tea Party get its way in the election and do such damage to create not only a Republican House, that's one thing, but a Republican House whose mission was to make sure he got absolutely nothing done. And now it's affecting the presidential race. The possibility of unlimited money coming his way has scared the White House into going down this road that I think actually tarnishes the president's image. And so it is having a negative impact there, and I hope that he moves away from it as much as possible.
Senator Feingold, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're very busy today, and I appreciate your taking the time.
I look forward to getting on the show again.
All right. Well, that can be arranged. I appreciate it.
We will do it.
Okay.